Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of New Media Lab. I'm your host, Rob Southgate. Hey, today we have a really fun one. I say that every time, I think. But it is. We've got Troy Heinritz. He is a podcaster, actually a Podcast Award-nominated podcaster, who is also not only a friend, but kind of my tech guy. Troy is always plugged into what apps are out there, different tools that we can use. He knows a lot about electronics and computers. Just an all-around great guy that is a wellspring of information. So rather than hear me talk about how great Troy is, I'm going to let you hear for yourself. Troy, thank you so much for joining me on New Media Lab today. I can't tell you how much fun it is to talk to you.
It's absolutely fun because it's really weird when you think about the fact that we're basically neighbors and we only met over podcasting.
Well, yeah. And, you know, it's funny for those of you that don't know Troy. Troy does a number of podcasts, but the one that we'll say before we get into who you are and everything, you were on the Under the Dome podcast.
Correct. I guess we would say we were competitors, but we don't really compete. But podcasting's all about fun.
Yeah, never. But what was funny is Wayne, your partner, was writing to me and saying he was a big fan. And then all of a sudden I'm getting these other tweets, and I thought it was Wayne. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, man, I live like right by you. And then I'm like, wait, Wayne, I thought you were at that time, was he in Wisconsin
California or whatever? Yeah.
California. And you go, no, man, it's Troy. I'm like right here. I'm like, wow, what in the heck? Because I think that what did it was one of you tweeted a quote from our show out.
Yeah, you happened to say something about like, hey, I'm going up north or something, and I was like, well, shoot, I like work right there, and then
but you tweeted it out. It was like, what? Who does that? Which is awesome. So Troy, let them know who you are, what you do. Give a quick one, and then I want you to talk about how you got into podcasting.
Sure. I guess the simple would be I'm Troy Heinritz. I have a broadcasting degree. I did terrestrial radio for 6 years, both sales and on air and production. And that kind of is where I started this journey, I guess, is way back when in the college days. And then went out and had to move to Chicago with my missus. I followed love instead of work. And obviously you can't jump to radio that quickly when you go from, a market of nothing to a number 3 market in the country. And so I had to find a different job. So I worked with technology and computers and data, and basically was like, I just kind of got an itch to get back into this thing. And a buddy of mine did a Lost podcast and then went to a Fringe podcast, and listening to his podcast, found out he was a Packers fan. And I am a Green Bay Packers fan. So then I started talking to him, and I was like, hey, this would be kind of fun. Let's find a show we could do. And Under the Dome came around, and we'd both read the book. And so we said, hey, let's take a stab at this and see what happens. And ever since then, we've been a podcasting duo.
Absolutely. You guys are a lot of fun together. And and it's funny. We went out for, I don't know, you wouldn't call it dinner, but we're not really drinkers. But we went out for drinks, I guess. Yeah. And with the three of us, I got to meet Wayne in person. And it was funny because we realized really kind of the starting point in podcasting for all of us was kind of Under the Dome.
Which is funny when you think about it, because as you listen to our Under the Dome shows, yours was the Chester's Mill Report, and mine was Under the Dome Radio. And you get to like towards season 3 and you're like, oh my goodness, why are we still watching the show?
Why? And then it was terrible. But boy, what a great community we found, huh?
It was fantastic. And I think that's really what it was. When you think about podcasting and this voice that you have, it was like, man, if I owe everything I'm doing today to that wonderful CBS show.
Wow. You know what? We got to throw it a little love, I guess, even though, please, it got rough.
It did.
But you know what? There were great people involved in it. And I think what it told us, and this might be a lesson for people that are looking at getting into, it doesn't matter what, if it's podcasting, vlogging, whatever, find something that you have fun with, that you can be passionate about. Don't just do it. Like, oh, you know what, I'm going to do Under the Dome. I have no interest in it. Because if you don't have any interest in it, you're not going to have that fun community with it either.
And that's huge. I mean, when
we
were sitting there talking about it, we were like, are we really going to do this for a third season? And then somebody gave us an iTunes review that said, man, the podcast is better than the show.
Yes.
I was like, wow, I can't let these people down. These are my people, They're expecting me to come back and tell them how good or bad it was this week and how crazy it got and what fun we were able to do with it because it was so crazy. And we had more listener feedback in the third season for the worst part of the show than we did when the show was actually good back in season 1. It was amazing.
Yeah, I could actually say the same was true with us. It was because we got so active with Twitter.
Yes, Twitter's huge.
And the live tweeting, my gosh. I mean, the interaction with the listener was crazy. And the best part of that, and you do other podcasts. You do the Blacklist podcast. I'm sure that you experienced the same thing I did, which is you made that connection on live tweeting the show, and then all of a sudden that same person is not only listening to the Under the Dome show, but they're listening to your Packer show. They're listening to your Blacklist show. In our case, like they followed, some went with our family type shows. Some went with our, like I have one that's a huge Walking Dead fan that I'm not even on that show. But because of our live tweeting on Under the Dome, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you do this too. And it was like, wow. So there's a lesson. I mean, community. And they will build those threads and go to those other things.
And it's really sad when you think about Twitter in its current state. I mean, we're talking about new media, and they're like, "Oh, Twitter's not making money," and Twitter just laid off, workers. I think it was this past week, towards the middle of October, whenever you're listening to this, 2015. And the thing that I loved about Twitter is that we actually sent out a tweet to one of the kind of guest actors for a small arc on Under the Dome by the name of Kevin Sizemore. He played Officer Randolph. He was in episodes 2, 3, and dead in episode 4.
Right.
So I guess you could say he was in episode 4. And it was funny because all I tweeted him was, because he had his profile on top of Twitter, and I just tweeted him and I was like, excited to see you on Under the Dome. Really love your Bible verse. I'm an Ephesians 4:32 kind of guy. Like, that's all I tweeted him, right? And he tweets back and he's like, super cool, man. Let's get on Skype and talk. And I was like, I'm a guy in a basement, just talking to the world. And here I got this guy from LA who wants to have a conversation with me.
Right.
And we had a great conversation. We interviewed him on the show. He does his run. I get a call in November of that year, and it's Kevin Sizemore on the phone. Prior to this, not like, I kid you not, like a couple weeks before, Wayne and I are like, what should we do? What should we do for our next show? Because we got to do something since Under the Dome's only in the fall or in the summer. We need a fall show. And I was telling him I saw this really cool show at the Upfronts called Resurrection on ABC. And I think it's going to be the next Lost. It's really going to be a really big thing. We got to jump on this and do it. So we agree to do Resurrection. 2 weeks later, Kevin calls me up. Hey, I'm down in Atlanta. I'm at the Devious Made Studios, and we're going to do this Resurrection show. You guys should totally do a podcast for it.
That's crazy.
I'm like, Kevin, we're totally doing that podcast. He's like, all right, give me a few minutes and I'll call you back. Didn't hear from him for like a while. He's like, hey, I'm working on some stuff. Be on the lookout. ABC might call you. Now it's like February. The show is going to start in March, right after the Oscars. And I'm at a company outing downtown Chicago, poor cell reception. I get a phone call. It's one of those unknowns on my phone, right? And I'm like, I'm not going to answer this. It's a telemarketer.
Juliet Prison calling you.
Exactly right. And something told me to answer the phone, and I answered the phone, and it was ABC television from New York. And it's like, hey, how you doing, Troy? And lo and behold, 2 minutes later in that conversation, it was, hey, do you want to interview Aaron Zellman, the creator of Resurrection? And I was like, let me check my schedule. I put the phone down. I'm like jumping up and down, doing a happy dance, and then pick the phone back up. And it's like, yeah, sure. Sounds great. It'll be a good time. Wow. Totally played it cool. And after that, literally, we had a partnership with ABC for that entire first season of Resurrection because it was only 8 episodes for the spring run. And we literally interviewed the entire cast, short of Omar Epps and Kurtwood Smith and Francis Fisher, since they were kind of the bigger names.
Right.
But every other actor on the show, including the little kid Jacob, Landon Jimenez, he was awesome. Travis Young, he's been on The Walking Dead. Just everybody on the show. It was such an amazing experience to have somebody from the show on every single week, because it gave for a TV fan podcaster like us a real different perspective on how a character for television actually happens. And then you get this entire kind of new media fan community. You have the people that are like for Cochise and the people that are against Cochise and Falling Skies, or the people that are for Big Jim on Under the Dome. And there's these like communities that just go behind these characters, let alone the shows. And it's just amazing to watch it unfold, because the internet is literally instantaneous. Like, you have instant friends and instant people that buy into what you're saying.
It's funny you say that, because with Falling Skies, there were, people that were behind certain characters. And we even did it with our show, where I would pit myself against Frank. And I would say, Team Rob or Team Frank, because he liked certain characters. I'm like, nope, they're crap. This is the character. And we got a couple of memes that people made about us, The best was getting the emails, though, or like they'd write a whole thing, and then at the bottom it would, hashtag Team Rob. I loved that. I thought that was really funny, but it really, once again, it's building that community. It's sharing it with the fans. Some shows are all about like being critics and ripping it apart. And then other shows are just about all the love. As you know, we're about, let's just have fun with it. Let's just enjoy it. And I know that's how you are too. I mean, I've listened to your Blacklist podcast. You don't have a problem saying when something's not happening, but man, you guys love the show and it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to say like, I really wish they would do this in a different direction, versus saying, man, that was really stupid.
Right.
I don't like that. And they're just totally hating on it. I mean, there's a different way to do it. You can call it out respectfully.
Hey man, we got through Under the Dome.
Absolutely.
We were at that point though. It went into 4 seasons. I think we would have lost the respectability in that last season. I think it would have been over.
And which was funny was that it took us 3 seasons, and I finally got Under the Dome CBS's account, the real account, to actually favorite one of my tweets. So I was like, hallelujah, mission accomplished, and I'm done.
That's excellent. So Troy, you hold a special place for me. Aside from everything we just talked about, you are this like techno head. Like every time I have interaction with you, you throw out another app. You throw out another like, hey, have you tried Clammr? Hey, have you tried Blab? Even in the conversation before recording today, you did that.
Right.
So I want to hear what are the ones that are lighting you up right now? And then I want to get some specifics like Clammr. I want to hear how you're using it.
Yeah. And Clammr is such a really great thing. We were privileged to be nominated for an award for the best entertainment podcast for the Podcast Awards. It's a people's choice voting kind of thing. It happens in April in Las Vegas as part of New Media Expo. And we were at New Media Expo as Clammr was launching. Literally just in beta, and met the people, met the team, and they were like, man, this is what we're doing. And I was like, this is so good, because it's literally a 15-second, or technically it's an 18-second long, but think of it like a 15-second radio commercial. Whether it's part of your episode, something you want to create specific, or just want to have fun with like a mix mashup kind of thing. I mean, it's literally 18 seconds of pure audio that literally when you put the player on Twitter or Facebook, it plays in line like SoundCloud does on Twitter and Facebook. So this is like the best way to market anything, whether it's your podcast, whether it's your blog. We actually just did an article, ERE, for the recruiting side of the house for my day job. They're talking about using Clammr to promote your jobs at your place of work. And I was
interesting.
Like, that is brilliant. I mean, nobody wants to sit there and read a job description, but if you can get somebody with some energy to get behind the microphone and be like, that financial analyst position, you can go some, great distances with that. If you just sign up here and go to to apply for our company.
Yeah.
I mean, it just sounds cooler.
Yeah. Well, it really is a great product. And, I know that you've been very active with it. And this is the ground floor. This is the point when people can really be creative and really explore those options like you just brought up. How are you using it? Now, let's talk specifically Blacklist, because the first time you told me about it, you gave me some very specific strategies. How are you doing it?
So what we tend to do is we do three things. Number one, obviously promote our show. So we'll take the best of our stuff from that episode that week, make them up into these little bite-sized chunks, kind of trickle them out through the course of the week. We've changed that strategy a little bit this year. I'm making them all at once and just posting them at once, because then I can use them in my social media tweets and schedules and Buffer and Hootsuite and all that jazz for anybody that's familiar in the social networking world. But I'm basically creating little commercials of our show. And the nice thing about it is that there's this hear more button. So if you like what you hear, you can literally push this button and boom, you're listening to the podcast, and it counts as a download for stats, which is good. The second thing we're doing is then we actually do what's called a section of the podcast where Red Reddington, one of the characters, he has these like extravagant stories that he tells to make a point. And so we came up with this concept of a segment called Red's Rhetoric, where literally we would play the two best story times with Red on the podcast, and they get people to vote, kind of like Team Rob and Team Frank.
Right.
We're doing basically Red Wiggle or Red Home would be the case for the episode that aired for episode 2 of season 3. And literally then on Clammr, people can listen to the clip again, and there's a thumbs up so they can like it. So then literally we can start getting, it's literally an automatic voting concept to get people to push those like buttons. And if it gets liked enough, it actually goes on to something called the Clammr Cast, which is at clammrcast.com, clamorcast.com. And it's literally a top 20 of all the clamors from that last week that got liked.
Oh, nice.
So the goal, obviously, is to get more people to like our stuff to make the top 20 countdown on this podcast that Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting does. It's really, really cool. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is we're having people from our audience love what we do so much that are taking our stuff and like mashing it up with other stuff.
Oh, cool.
We had
more audience interaction. I love it.
It was so great. We had an entire clip reel done for the end of season 2 of the Blacklist that we actually said the two guys that did this, Rory and Bill, they did such a great job. We actually said, you guys are so awesome. We're going to give you the reins. And they basically hijacked the podcast. And they did the entire intro, the entire opening, and they literally played this clip reel as like a tribute, as a thank you to Aaron and I for all the work we did, because we don't get paid for doing it. We do it for fun because we like the show and we like the interaction. So just as a nice thank you, they did this, and it was hysterical. It was the funniest thing, the most creative. I laughed so hard. It was awesome. One of them is I have this really crazy theory for the Blacklist that Red could potentially be a transgender type situation. We see that a lot in the news with Caitlyn recently. So this whole thing that Lizzie might not know her mother, but her mother might be still alive or in the wind.
And her mother would be Red?
Her mother would be Red. That was my crazy theory, right?
Okay. Anyone that listens to my podcast knows that I am full of crazy theories. Troy, you've beaten me.
I have beaten you.
That is amazing.
And there's evidence to like prove it in the show. So it's not like it's just like a crackpot theory. This is like a plausible concept. And so what these guys did was they took Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Actually, it'd be Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the original movie with Gene Wilder. And it literally says, like, it starts out, ladies and gentlemen, like when they first come into the room or whatever after the tiny hallway, like, ladies and gentlemen. And then Aaron says, Troy has this crazy theory that Red is indeed Liz's mom. And then you hear Gene Wilder, come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
Very nice.
So brilliant. What was the other one they did? They did Billy Madison, right? When they're doing the end sequence, the final test, the quiz off in the auditorium.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, and Troy has this theory that Red is in fact Liz's mom, and he comes on and says, what you have just said is the most idiotic thing I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber because they heard it.
Because they heard it. That's
what
fantastic.
They do. They take these clips, these movie clips or sound clips or whatever. Another one was just this past week. Bill was back again. Bill did one where Aaron was like, do you ever get that song in your head when anyone ever says, keep them separated? And then he goes, you got to keep them separated. And Aaron's like, I just hate that when that song gets in your head the rest of the day. And then Bill continues like, and And it's like, it's just so brilliant. It's 18 seconds of pure audio bliss.
Yeah, that's fun, man.
Such a great tool. And what Clammr's doing with it is they're trying to make it like an 18-second podcast. Like you can literally get news clip, and literally get like the news. But it's like there's just so much more you could do with the tool than just 18 seconds of, literally doing the 15-second newscast.
Now, this brings up two more Clammr questions from me. One is, what are you doing with them? You mentioned a few different things, but you're putting it out there. You're tweeting out these little Clammrs you're making. You're putting it on your Facebook page. You're using it across your social media. Am I correct?
Correct.
And you said you're doing them all at once. The strategy you had before, you had told me you were doing stuff like, let's say you're doing a TV show. You were saying a half hour before I start sending these out. Are you still going with something like that, or does that not really matter?
I try to. What I really try to is make sure that I can get on there before the show starts and just be like, hey, I guess it depends. So for Under the Dome, we did a live reaction cast right after the show ended. So on Clammr, what I would do is I'd use Clammr to record the 15-second audio to be like, hey, guys, don't forget, Troy and Wayne will be live with you after the show. Make sure you come on over to...
Oh, that's really good, man.
underthedomeradio.com/live. And then we put the Clammr out on social media during the course of the evening, and then people could hear the Clammr during the commercial breaks.
Right.
And yada, yada, yada.
Now, when you're doing that, are you attaching a picture to it, or are you just putting the audio clip out there and tweeting it out, or how are you doing that?
Whatever floats your boat. You can do picture, you can do just the audio, you can do audio with text, you can have the audio with a picture with a subscribe in iTunes button.
So you're mixing it up.
Yeah, totally. You just want to make sure that it's something that's usable so that someone, when they interact with that tweet or that Facebook or on Clammr directly, if they interact with it, there's something there for them to take away once they listen to that 15 seconds of audio.
Now, the other question I had, when we were talking about Clammr before, you mentioned some tools, because you can do stuff right through Clammr, but you had mentioned another tool for creating Clammrs. What was that?
I just use my own audio editing software, so whether that's Audacity or Audition or GarageBand or Logic or whatever. What I did was I actually made myself a predefined 18-second like music bed and intro, and then that way when I take the clips from the episode as I'm editing, after the podcast is recorded, I can just quickly take those clips, boom, put them on another multi-track, mix it down, boom, I have my Clammr. I can literally have all my Clammrs made as part of the editing process, so I don't have to go back and try to find them later, because I think where people get scared with Clammr is that they have to find something to clam or Clammr.
Yes.
And that's always a challenge.
Well, do we have a term for that specifically? I guess to Clammr would be the term.
Correct.
Okay.
We like calling it, make a clam, because
I want to call it clam. I think that's kind of fun.
Because then you can go clamming.
Yes.
If you're trying to find clams to play.
But if you like them, you're a clam digger.
Exactly. It's totally true. But what I found out was there's actually a really great, and I'm so glad we're talking about this now, because there was such an issue when iOS 9 came out. As podcasters, we subscribe to a lot of podcasts. So the podcasts app delivered by Apple in 9.0 was actually broken. And so people were jumping to go check out other podcast apps, one of them being this app called Overcasts. And Overcast is such a great app in its right, and they just upgraded it to 2.0, so you get all of the pro features for free. Totally awesome that the developers did that. But what they did was in iOS 9, there's this new feature with Siri where if you're in a particular app, like on a website or in an email or whatever, you can activate Siri and then say, remind me about this. And what Siri will do is put a reminder on the Reminders app with a link that goes back to the application at exactly that spot where you left. Well, in Overcast, what I found out was, as I was listening back to some episodes, that I would literally say, remind me about this. And when it would put the bookmark for Overcast on the Reminders app and I tapped on it, it took me right to that time code mark. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant, because now I can listen to my show and be like, okay, I laughed at that and myself, which we tend to do as podcasters.
It happens, yeah. It happens.
So I was like, oh, if I found that funny a second time, then it must be funny. So, hey, remind me about this and remind me. Now I have an entire list on my Reminders app of all the stuff I need to go clam. And I could quickly just go back into my Audition file and go, okay, 17-minute mark, 23-minute mark, 16-minute mark, grab those all up, make them all out. Took like 20 minutes to make like 10 Clammrs the other day.
Wow.
And you're done for the week. It's
wow.
awesome.
Excellent. All right. we're going to run out of time. I knew this would happen with you, Troy.
Sure.
You're loving Blab.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's still some things they need to work out from what they're doing with Blab. Now, Blab is a kind of Google Hangouts competitor, I guess you'd want to call it. Google Hangouts does a really cool thing with you can do up to 10 people, but only one person gets seen on the screen at a time, as whoever's the featured speaker as it kind of rolls through. Blab does a really nice job of making it kind of like Hollywood Squares, where you get 4 boxes or Brady Bunch style, and you get the 4 boxes up there of people that come in and want to chat, or you could lock the seats down and just have one person or 2 people or what have you. But it's got a really great chat room and great chat features, kind of like the old IRC days, down the right-hand side, where you can ask questions, pose topics, and then anybody that's in the Blab, there's a nice button that says "Tell a little bird," and then boom, they can literally be tweeting out as the conversation is happening. So if you're talking about, Coach Cheese did this on Falling Skies, or the Packers just did this, and you could literally be like watching the game live and interacting with your audience on Blab at the same time. I mean, it's brilliant on what they can do with all of this. And what the Blab service is trying to get to is that when you're done with the Blab, if you record it, then you can literally push one button and send the Blab right to YouTube, which we recommend you don't do, obviously, because you want to put title sequence and cards and all of that YouTube stuff on it. But at least you can get it up there if you wanted to get it up there. And they actually send you a copy of the completely consolidated MP3 file and a completely consolidated MP4 video file that you can then use and edit further if you needed to, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Now there's some...
That all sounds good to me.
Yeah, but there's some... If you're an audio person that's like an audiophile, then you want to make sure that you really take a look at that audio, because sometimes it like auto ducks weird, and if there's a delay or something, it gets a little off. But for what they did for beta, I mean, really, really phenomenal stuff. And I think they just bought another company that was looking to do the exact same thing. And with them purchasing them, the two heads combined, I think it's going to be an absolutely fantastic service.
Wow. Okay. Moving on. You know what? I think what we're going to do, Troy, is as this show evolves, I think maybe we'll do a couple of specific shows. We'll do one that is just like a half hour of Clammr talk. We'll get you, maybe we'll get Dave Jackson, and we'll just talk Clammr.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So we'll start making some pointed ones. But for a show like this, I want the audience to get to know you a little bit, and I want to kind of introduce these ideas, because I know I hear them. The other shows that we've done, I've spent the week searching stuff and Googling stuff and learning about things that are coming up. But I think some pointed ones would be fun too. So not a lot of time. I want to hear you mention a couple other things in our pre-show talk. Let's hear them.
Well, I was really intrigued by, I believe it was Lilith was on your first episode.
Yes.
She was like a rock star with Tumblr. And I was like, man, especially if you're doing a TV fan podcast, like Tumblr is where you really need to be along with Twitter. And I'm like, I just don't have the time to manage all these social media platforms.
Right.
And so then I was like, well, wait, if I go to Instagram has the ability to auto-publish to Tumblr and auto-publish to Twitter. So really, I only need to publish once and push it out to 2 other social platforms. I'm going to go with Instagram. Well, then you get into but then you got to come up with a picture and make it funny and hashtags and all this other stuff. And what I found out was that there's this really cool app called WordSwag, at least on iOS, or I think there's a desktop web app called Canva that you can use. And literally what I do is I have the TV show on my iPhone. I purchase the season so I can take screen caps of the episode, take the screen cap that I want, open up WordSwag, type in a couple funny things of text, and then boom, I literally have an Instagram photo that can then also go to Tumblr and Twitter, and just put 1 or 2 of those out a day. Literally, I'm doing it in, whatever, Starbucks, if you're buying a cup of coffee. Or...
Yeah, it takes a minute to do the Instagram. Sure.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. It takes like less than 2 minutes to make the photo.
Oh, okay. So the whole process, you can do it while you're standing there waiting for your coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. Whether you're pumping gas, not by the car, because you're not supposed to use your cell phone by the car when you're pumping gas. But
public service announcement from Troy.
Exactly right. But yeah, whether you're, just waiting for your kids at soccer practice or what have you. I mean, there's literally a 3-minute part of your day where you can literally use this little tiny device in your hand and your smartphone to literally find a picture, make sure you have the legal right to use it, and then, of course, just add some little fun text to it. Like there was one from the Blacklist episode this past week where the director gives his name, right? His name's Peter. And he's like this huge press conference, like no one's ever in the history of this position ever given out the name of the director. Now you know who I am. So I just got a picture of David Strathan and put it up there from the episode. And I said, great, I can finally get a drink at Cheers. Because now everybody knows his name.
Right. I got it.
Viral. I mean, it was like my friend's like, no one's going to get a Cheers reference. Everybody's too young and da-da-da. Everybody got it. It was like ecstatic. It was awesome. That
is really great. And that was this app that you were using this for.
Word Swag.
It's
awesome.
Great. All right.
Love it.
Now, was Instagram the other thing you wanted to talk about?
Yep. Instagram, just I can't recommend it enough. I mean, especially if you have the ability to get images. I mean, they always say picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So if you can get an image to, do your podcast, whether it's even if you're doing your own podcast or your own blog or something and have the ability to take your own photos. There's a really great podcast out there called Mommy's Cocktail Hour. Fantastic episode for moms who are just like, we have kids in school and, husbands that want to do sports. And we just want to have a place that we can hang out with our peeps, our other mothers and talk about parenting issues and parenting tips. And they do it, of course, while they have a few cocktails. And so what they do is they actually have their own cocktail recipes and they take a picture with their own phone and then use WordSwag or Canva to make their album art for every episode.
Oh, that's great.
So
we're actually going to be doing an episode all about album art.
Exactly.
So that is one that I'll do a little exploring on that and we'll definitely talk about that. That's great.
Yeah. And if we need to get Tawny or those guys from Mommy's Cocktail Hour to be on that episode with you, I could definitely get you their names. That'd be great.
Love it. That sounds great. I'm going to check them out. So Troy, we're out of time for this episode, but I am going to have you back. No question. Thank you so much, Troy.
Absolutely.
Last thing. I'm terrible at the endings. I always like to throw one last thing in. If you could give any advice to somebody wanting to get into new media, whether it's blogging, podcasting, video, what would be your off the cuff advice? Somebody comes up to you and says, hey man, I know you do this stuff. I'm really thinking about starting a YouTube channel, or I really want to get into blogging. What do you say to them?
Be your authentic self. Nobody wants to listen to a Hollywood copycat or someone that does the same thing that someone else does or uses a template that somebody else does. Be your authentic self. People are going to connect with you because of who you are. And if you can really bring something different to the table, that's how your audience grows, because they're connecting with you on a personal level. And then you have that listener, that confidant, that friend for life.
Fantastic. Great advice. And we'll leave it at that. Troy, once again, thank you so much. And I do look forward to having you back on.
I'd be glad to be back on, Rob. This is awesome. I love new media, and it's so great you're doing this.
Thanks a lot, Troy. Thanks again for joining us on New Media Lab. It was such a pleasure talking to Troy. I know that he gave me a lot of ideas that had me really fired up, and I hope it had the same effect on you. You can follow me on Twitter at rsouthgate. You can follow our company at SMG Pods. You can find all our shows at our website, www.southgatemediagroup.com. Also, we wouldn't be taking our own advice if we didn't have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Clammr, basically any of the social media platforms that were discussed here or that are out there, we try to be a part of. Just look up Southgate Media Group and eventually look up New Media Lab. Contact information for Troy and all his social media links can be found in the show notes, and also we'll put links on our website too. If you have questions for me or for Troy, please write to our email, southgatemediagroup@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or anywhere else you get your podcasts. This has been a production of Southgate Media Group. We will talk to you next week. Thanks again for listening.